Joining us now, Republican Senator Mitt Romney of Utah. Senator, thanks for joining us. The Pentagon released the names of the 13 service members killed in Kabul, and those names include Staff Sergeant Darren Taylor Hoover from your state of Utah. His parents say he's the best son. He was the best son that two parents could ever ask for. How do you think Staff Sergeant Hoover is going to be remembered?
Well, I think as an American hero, there's no question but that these men and very young women showed compassion and courage and did everything they could to help evacuate Americans and others who would come here illegally. It's an extraordinary sacrifice that they make and is very much in keeping with our extraordinary national heritage.
You have said that it's unthinkable that the U.S. would leave anyone behind, but you just heard Jake Sullivan talk about how August 31st is not a cliff and some people might be left behind. And, you know, to be fair, the White House says another terrorist attack at the airport is imminent, which is obviously complicating the evacuation efforts. Should the U.S. stay? Should there be a U.S. military presence in the Kabul airport until every American citizen and legal permanent resident and Afghan SIV applicant is gone, even if that means service members staying for weeks or months? And of course, there's this very real possibility of more American casualties.
Leaving Americans behind and leaving our Afghan friends behind who've worked with us would put upon us and will put upon us a moral stain. And this is the result of very ineffective decisions, terrible decisions made by the prior administration and by the current administration. This did not have to happen. It was preventable. And let me note that's very different than the military. Our military came in at the very last moment and has performed admirably, as far as I can tell, to move people out as quickly as possible. But we didn't have to be in this rush circumstance with terrorists breathing down our neck. But it's really the responsibility of the prior administration and this administration that has caused this crisis to be upon us and has led to what is, without question, a humanitarian and foreign policy tragedy.
But this is the situation we're in, regardless of how we got here. And there is this very real trade-off that we were talking about on my show during the week and also here before the terrorist attack. The risk of keeping American service members there is what happened Thursday. So if we stay there until no American and no Afghan SIV applicant is left behind, we risk more events like Thursday.
Yeah, but Jake, if you focus on, gosh, what should we do right now? Recognize that we're in the position we're in right now because of terrible decisions made by two administrations. One, the Trump administration, negotiating directly with the Taliban, getting ready to invite them to Camp David, opening up a prison of 5,000 Taliban and probably ISIS-K individuals and letting them free. I mean, we don't know whether some of them were involved in the attack that occurred. These were the decisions that led to what you're seeing and the danger that exists at the airport. This should not have happened. President Biden closing the Bagram Air Base. That's what's led to what's happening. So right now you have to ask, okay, what's the action we could take at this very last minute, which is most likely to get most Americans and most of our friends out of Afghanistan? That's a decision that the commanders on the ground are going to have to make. But the reality is, the fact that we're in this position is the result of bad decisions made by two administrations.
Just to play devil's advocate here, Senator, both Trump and Biden were trying to end the war in Afghanistan. And I recognize that you disagree with the decision to pull all troops out. You've said you would have left behind a residual force of, I think you said around 5,000 service members, mainly focused on counterterrorism. Many of the service members killed on Thursday were just born when the war began in 2001. How do you respond to people who say that that fact that we've been there 20 years, the collapse of the Afghan government and the Afghan military, is just more evidence that the American people, American service members, no matter how brave, no matter how valorous, they were never going to be able to stabilize Afghanistan. And this shows that the U.S. is correct in leaving.
Well, Jake, there's a political slogan, end endless wars, but that doesn't translate into a serious policy decision. And the real policy is this: you can't, as one party, end a war. It takes two parties to end a war. The Taliban And the radical violent jihadists in the world, they haven't stopped fighting. They're going to continue to fight us. The war is not over. We're just no longer in a place where the war had its apex, where the Taliban was able to allow al-Qaeda to grow and to attack us on 9/11. We went to Afghanistan because we got attacked on 9/11 and lost thousands of American lives. Now America is more in danger. The reason we have a military is to protect America. And by the decision to pull our military out of Afghanistan puts us in greater danger. Don't forget, we went to Afghanistan to knock down al-Qaeda, but we stayed in Afghanistan to make sure they couldn't reconstitute to attack us again. So pulling out means we are less safe, and also recognize the war is not over. We're just in a weaker position. We don't have boots on the ground. We don't have eyes on the ground. When they say, look, we have over-the-horizon capacity, that's a fancy phrase. What does that mean? It means we're not there. The nearest American air base is, what, 1,000 miles away? I mean, you know, I had eyes on my over the horizon on my teenagers, but that meant I had no idea what they were doing. Likewise, this idea that somehow we're still in control is not real, and America is in greater danger.
So I hear you saying that you think we're less safe for leaving Afghanistan than if we have stayed. Do you think that we are less safe now than we were before we went into Afghanistan 20 years ago?
Well, I think that's hard to measure, but we're certainly less safe than we were when we had a group of, let's say, 5,000 American service people in Afghanistan standing up as the backbone behind some 250,000 Afghan troops who were keeping at bay the Taliban and other terror groups. That made us a great deal safer. And by the way, we have thousands of troops, tens of thousands of troops in Germany, in South Korea, in Japan. Why are they there? They're there not as favors to those countries, but because we believe that keeps us and the world safer. And the idea that we would keep several thousand troops in Afghanistan as long as necessary to keep us more safe is, of course, the appropriate policy to take. But these political slogans come in the way, and endless wars. The war is not ended when only one party pulls out and the others are continuing to fight, and now fight with more aggression. Look, going forward, we're going to have to recognize we're in a much more dangerous position, and we're going to have to invest, I'm afraid, more resources to keep ourselves safe.
I've heard that argument before about the fact that the U.S. service members are stationed in Germany and Japan and in South Korea. But it's also true that they're not being killed by IEDs or by an insurgent group. And you know, I've talked to, look, veterans like everybody else are all over the map when it comes to this decision and this horrible week and this and that. But I've talked to some veterans, conservatives even, who say, I'm glad we're getting out. I don't want any more Gold Star families created.
Yeah, the reality is we're even have a greater reason to main troops in a place where there is hostility, because those people are going to bring their hostility to America and to Americans and to our friends, whether we like it or not. The idea that somehow we can pull out of a dangerous place where radical violent jihadists are organizing, that we can pull out of that and that's going to stop them, well, that's fantasy. They're going to continue in their effort to regroup and to come after America. Don't forget what they did on 9/11. The reason, again, we were in Afghanistan was to keep another 9/11 from happening. Now we pull out, and the Taliban is much stronger than they were before, in part because of all the armament we've given them. ISIS-K is now alive. The old ISIS that still is in Syria and Iraq, they're stronger. These forces of hate that consider America the great Satan, they're still out there. They're still fighting us. That war, unfortunately, goes on. And the idea that we've pulled out of one of the places that was essential to push back against them is an idea that makes me far more concerned that had we retained a small footprint there to support the people on the front lines, the Afghan National Security Forces, that we're doing a pretty darn good job.
Your home state of Utah is welcoming Afghan refugees, as I would expect from Utah, frankly. But many conservative voices, including Republican lawmakers, have been speaking out against letting Afghans come into the country. Congressman Matt Rosendale said this crisis, quote, is not an excuse to flood our country with refugees from Afghanistan, and on and on. How do you think the majority of Republicans in the House and Senate would vote if asked whether the U.S. should accept Afghan refugees?
Well, I don't really know, of course, but I believe in their heart of hearts, they recognize that we have a moral responsibility, and in keeping with our national character, we welcome people into our country who seek asylum, and those particularly who have fought alongside our troops and have enabled our troops to have a higher degree of safety than they would have had otherwise. That those are people to whom we owe a debt of gratitude, and we would welcome them into our country. Look, I think it's one of the characteristics of our great nation that we are a nation that welcomes with open arms our friends from around the world. And don't forget, you know, we're talking about, I don't know, 10, 20, 30, maybe 50,000 Afghans. How many people are coming across the border illegally? That number is exceeded almost every month. So, you know, let's put this in perspective. And I, for one, am very pleased that we're going to have individuals that come to our country that can contribute to America and believe in the principles upon which our nation was founded.